Who is the greatest sporting person ever? What's the greatest sports team? Who's the greatest musician? Who was the greatest president? Who was the greatest explorer? Who is today the greatest of anything? The greatest entrepreneur, the greatest inventor. Have you ever thought about it? Well, historians do. Historians love to try to identify in history who the greatest in all these areas of life are, and many more. Those of us that enjoy sports, we love to sit with our friends and discuss which team was the greatest. Who was the greatest basketball player? Was it Michael Jordan? Was it Bill Russell? Was it Dr. J? I mean, who was the greatest basketball player of all time? Maybe it's Steph Curry. Who was the greatest baseball player? Was it Willie Mays? Was it Babe Ruth? I mean, we could have that conversation. What is the greatest? Who is the greatest? Well, Jesus had a conversation with some of the enemies that he had. You know, isn't it interesting? An enemy can get together when they would be mutual enemies against each other, but when there is someone that they want to attack, they can join forces. And so it was with the enemies in Jesus' day against Jesus. I mean, people like the Herodians and the Pharisees and the Sadducees, they were enemies of each other. They didn't like each other. Oh, but when it came to Jesus, they joined forces. So they came to Jesus one day and they asked him a series of questions. They thought if they could just ask Jesus, they could trip him up. Well, it didn't work that way the first time, and it certainly isn't going to work that way this time. Well, the Pharisees thought they had the question. They thought they had the question that Jesus could certainly never answer. You know, most of us are familiar with the 10 Commandments, and sometimes we think that's all there is. Well, the Jews have counted up all the commandments in the Old Testament and have come up with the number of 613. The Jews would tell us there are 613 direct commandments in the Old Testament that a Jew was to follow, not just 10. So the Pharisees came to Jesus one day and, in light of all 613, said to Jesus, tell us, which of the commandments is the greatest? I mean, when they ask that question, I can almost see their smugness. I can almost see them smiling to each other like, we've got him. There's no way he could boil down the commandments to just one. But Jesus, in his wisdom, like normal, had an answer for the Jewish leadership. He looked at them and he said, the greatest commandment is, you should love the Lord your God with all your heart and soul and mind and strength. And then he followed it up and he said, the second greatest commandment is to love your neighbor as yourself. He summed up the entire law and the prophets. He took time to summarize all 613 commandments into two: love God and love others. You know, it shut the mouths of the Pharisees. And the way he answered the Herodians and the Sadducees, he shut their mouths as well. Sometimes we still have questions for Jesus. We still have questions for the Bible. We think somehow we could come up with a question no one's ever asked the Bible before, or in essence asked the Lord, and we're going to have it. And we're going to demonstrate that the Bible isn't really true and that it really doesn't have the answers to life. But every time, the answer is there. Now, we may reject it. We talked about that yesterday. I mean, we may reject it. We may not want it. We may not like the message and kill the messenger, but it doesn't change the answer. It's not like who was the greatest basketball player. You can debate that all you want. Who was the greatest composer? You can debate that all you want. There's really no clear answer. But the Bible has clear answers. And Jesus said to them, the greatest commandment is to love God, and the second is to love others. You know, Jesus then went on to turn the tables and ask his enemies a question. He asked them, who do you think whose son would Messiah be? Well, again, like the leaders in the beginning of Jesus' life, when they were asked, where is the Messiah to be born? And they immediately knew the answer. Well, I mean, they knew the answer, but they weren't about to voice it, because they understood that as soon as they answered that question, they would demonstrate from their heart that they didn't love the Lord with all their heart, mind, soul, and strength, that they weren't loving others better than themselves. They would have demonstrated the coldness and the deadness of their heart. I mean, for you, when you think about the Bible, how would you summarize it? It seems to me it couldn't get any better than to tell us that we're to love God and to love others. If we love God, we will love others. I mean, the book of 1 John is almost like that's the theme, right? He said, you can't say you love God and not love your brother. You can't love one you can't see and then not love the one that you can see. Oh, as we walk ourselves towards Easter, once again, you need to ask yourself the question, do you love God supremely? Is he really the one that takes your focus? Is there anyone else? Does anything else take precedent over loving God? Again, if you love God supremely and you're walking in obedience to his word, then we will be preparing our heart for the coming of his Son. We will be changed from the inside out. And today I need you to look into your heart and ask yourself what you love the most, who you love the most. And then you need to take stock. Is that loving of God moving you to love others? Well, today, remember, our hope is in the fact that Jesus Christ loved us so we can love others. Our hope is that he will fulfill his promise and he's going to come and receive us to himself where we can be with him forever. So today, if you love the Lord with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength, then do what Paul said. Love his appearing. And remember today, Jesus is coming again.